In the still of the night, I think of you. My heart beats with every thought of you.
She stood by the window, admiring the amazing sunrise. She sighed happily and wondered if their gloomy days were over. Did he still hold a grudge? After what happened last night, how could that even be possible? If he hadn't forgiven her, would he have made love to her so passionately and tenderly the way he did last night? She sighed again, remembering last night. She only knew a moment of panic, but it was just for a moment. This was her husband, she had reminded herself. She couldn't count how many times his searching hands had woken her during the night. What beautiful experiences they were. She smiled. It was everything she had imagined. The gentle way he had loved her, taking his time to please her without frightening her, and drawing her out of her shy inhibitions to match his pace. She could still remember his passion-laden voice when he told her, "I would hurt you, but only this first time and never again." She smiled happily, thinking how lucky she was to be his wife. She had been shy and nervous the first time, but thinking of all the things she had done subsequently out of her own volition, she cringed inside. She never knew she was that passionate. She never knew that wild side of her nature until last night with her husband. She felt a gentle pressure on her shoulders. "Good morning," Uche breathed. Drawing her into his arms, she relaxed on his body and sighed with pleasure, enjoying the warmth and comfort his body represented. "Did you sleep well?" "I can't say for sure. Someone woke me up every time I tried. Aside from that, it was wonderful." Uche turned her around and peered into her face, as if to make sure she was alright. Mma smiled up at him a bit shy by his intense gaze, and he smiled at her relieved. And then he kissed her softly and slowly deepened the kiss. She was lost again, and she gave herself up to the pure pleasure she was feeling inside. He loosened the rope and kept on kissing her. "Come back to bed," he urged her in a whisper. She smiled expectantly. "I want to, but we have to leave." "Why?" "I have an exhibition, remember? The sun has barely risen for the day." "Don't argue. I am not ready to let my wife out of bed yet." She smiled and followed him willingly. Yet, she thought, was this still a temporal wedding, till he was done salvaging his lost bride? Or were all that behind them? They needed to have that conversation, and this time around, they needed to finish it. She needed to know where he stood in this marriage. When she got to the venue of the exhibition, Helen waved her and started moving towards her. "How is it going?" Mma asked as she caught up with Helen. "Fine. The models are just arriving." "So how is the honeymoon, baby girl? I thought you wouldn't come in here today." "Certainly not this early." "Why not? I never thought Prince Charming would let you up this early." Mma laughed shyly. "You have forgotten this show is my baby too. All the same, everything is going on fine. No mishap. You shouldn't have come in this early." "Don't feel sorry for me. With Uche, every day is honeymoon." "I wasn't feeling sorry for you. Just Prince Charming, the poor man." They both laughed. She had a quiet lunch with Helen, and after making sure everything was set, she left. Mma parked her vehicle in front of the grand compound and gazed at it in astonishment. This was now her new home. Her new home with Uche, the love of her life. Realization dawned on her that she was indeed a married woman. She was Mma Okoha, she thought as she descended from her car. Before she could open the door, Mrs. Ekpothri opened the door smiling. Mma was surprised to see her. When she and Uche had come back before, they were so engrossed in each other that she didn't even recall how the door was opened. "Mrs. Ekpo, what a pleasant surprise. What are you doing here?" "I am your housekeeper." "Congratulations, madam. I was so happy when I heard." Mma was quite happy. She had thought she was going to have to deal with the surly housekeeper who connived with Angela. "I would like to apologize on behalf of my cousin. Mr. Uche told me what she did." It is not your fault. Mama smiled at the woman and entered the house. She dropped her bag on the bed and walked into the bathroom for a long and refreshing bath. When she came out of the bathroom, she found a chilled drink on a stool. She took a long sip of the drink and glanced at her watch. Where was Uche? She asked, agitated. She walked into the closet and took out the clothes she was going to wear to the occasion, and she glanced at her watch again before she sat on the vanity table to apply her makeup. Her cell phone rang and she picked it up. Hello? Ma, run when you see me because I'm going to kill you. Eva, when did you get back into the country? This morning, only to hear of your wedding? I can't believe you did this to me. It was your brother's fault. He rushed the whole thing. He didn't see any point in asking you to come because we planned a very private wedding, but your mother waylaid us. Remind me to kill him when we see this evening. And talking about this evening, can I ask you a favor? Ask away. Can you do a little modeling for some extra cash you may not need? It was settled then, and she put the phone down and glanced at her watch. She had only a couple of hours to get to the venue. Uche wasn't still home. Uche walked in just that minute. Slowly he regarded her in her black lacy slip. Mama turned at that minute, her relief so evident, but then she was suddenly overcome with shyness at the way he was looking at her. We barely have 1 hour. She tried to cover her shyness. He walked over to her and kissed her. I could hardly get any work done today. All I could think of was you and how many ways I want to make love to you. Don't be cruel. I promise I'll make it up to you after the show. After the show. Then we can have a proper honeymoon. Uche glanced at his watch, dropped his briefcase on the bed and began to strip himself of his clothes as if she wasn't there. She turned away at first. What was wrong with her? She asked herself. She looked up as he spoke. I'll have a quick shower. He smiled at her seductively, fully aware of her shyness as he walked into the bathroom. Happily, Mma picked up his scattered clothes and folded them neatly on the bed. Uche came out of the bathroom. He went to his closet to find the right clothes. Mma saw his confusion in choosing what to wear, and he glanced at her several times as if trying to choose something that would match what she was wearing. Mma walked past him and stood beside him examining the contents of his closets. From experience, she knew Uche didn't like wearing traditional clothes because he found them too confining, but she had sewn him several traditional wears during the good old days, which he had pushed to the back of his wardrobe. Then she brought out a simple kaftan. This will do? Before he could answer her, Mma bent low and urged him to step into the trousers, and then she tied the rope at his waist. Uche pulled the kaftan over his head. She fussed over him, trying to adjust the clothes. I feel like a mannequin. Looks perfect and trendy. Trust me, this is my field. By the time Mma finished dressing her husband, she had about 1 hour left. You will do, she said as she admired her work. Same car was waiting for them in front of the house. They almost missed the red carpet. Yet, as soon as the reporters saw them, they went into frenzy, as if competing who would take the best shot of them. Walking into the hall, all eyes turned on them. Several people in glistering dresses were already mingling, waiting for the show to start. There were people from almost all the sectors of the economy. Just then, Helen waved her, and she beckoned on her to join them. Not without noticing she came alone. Helen was looking breathtaking in simple gowns that molded her figure. You look fantastic. Thank you. Backstage calls? Helen smiled. Meet and greet for half an hour first, darling. Here comes Stanley and his date, Uche said. Mma saw the receptionist who worked for Uche draped on Stanley's arm, and they were walking towards them. The downside of marrying a fashion designer is that you get to dress uncomfortable. Stanley teased Uche. I'm beginning to think I'm someone else. Oh, but you look real good, sir. Mma, you're such a genius, IJ said. Mma quickly turned to Uche to see how he was taking his junior staff banter display of familiarity, but he seemed not affected by it. Mma looked at the girl and she recognized her type. Too ambitious and hungry for the good life and knows only one way to get it. Rich men. and she shook her head in pity for Stanley and wished he would come to his senses before the girl totally ruined him. She looked at the girl's dress and smiled. The cloth was one of the most expensive she had made. She wondered just how much the girl was milking Stanley with his good heart. "Eva is here," Mama said with excitement. Eva and Charles saw them and started towards them. They both were wearing her label. "Wow, Uche, you look breathtaking in that. Your handwork, darling," Eva said as she gave her brother a hug. "I am going to kill you after this occasion," she whispered to her brother, but everybody heard anyway. Mama could see that Helen wasn't comfortable being the only girl without a partner, and her heart went out to her. She was quiet throughout the conversation buzzing around her. She was sure Helen couldn't wait for them to go backstage. Mama smiled and gestured for Helen and Eva to follow her backstage. But to her greatest surprise, Chuck appeared at the doorway in jeans and t-shirts. "Why is he dressed like that?" she asked herself. "What a—" Charles couldn't finish his exclamation. Stanley whistled. Eva continued to laugh while Uche kept quiet. Mama looked at the scowl on his face. He looked like a bear with a sore head. "Eva!" he shouted as soon as he got to them. "What?" Eva snapped back at him. "Just tell me where I can find that psycho you call your friend, and I'll be on my way." "What happened? And by the way, what way is that to address someone?" Charles jumped to her defense. "I don't care about your protective instincts now. The crazy woman just bashed my new car. Not only that, she nearly killed Collins. She drove right into him in front of my house. If Collins didn't jump fast enough, he would have had more than a broken arm to contend with right now." "Is Collins alright?" Eva asked. "Inconvenienced according to him, but he will be." "What did you do to make her crazy enough to make an attempt on your brother's life?" Stanley asked, perplexed. "She knew right from the start that I wasn't going for the happily ever after. That's what you get for messing with the wrong woman. That is no reason to do something that crazy. She could have killed Collins and herself." "Manners, Chuck. Please say hi to the ladies." As if he just realized, he turned to them with an apologetic face. "My apologies, Mama. I didn't mean to spoil your day." "Why don't you join us and I will accept your apology?" Mama smiled at him. "Like this?" Chuck looked at his clothes. "Come on, it doesn't matter. You carry it off better than most of the guys in Thoughts tonight." Helen looked at Mama in panic, and she winked at her. Helen was suddenly nervous because as soon as Chuck stopped complaining, he began taking notice of the people standing in the group. He was standing beside her, and he was wreaking havoc on her nerves. She turned to him with a smile, meaning to greet him politely, but he gave her a scowl instead, and she looked down embarrassed. Of course, she wasn't the kind of girl who would attract his attention, she thought ruefully. "You are the girl who cut the flowers?" Helen couldn't believe it. He had already forgotten they were introduced. Helen turned to him and decided to be as impolite as he was being. "Yes, I am. But it's mere superstition, is it not?" He looked at her with a glimmer of amusement. "What?" he asked. "Superstition. You know, the belief behind catching the flower and the stockings." He laughed and looked at her. "If you really believe so, why are you twisting your fingers?" Helen didn't know she was doing that. She had always done that whenever she was nervous. But to do so in the presence of the man she was trying to put in his place was very silly of her. She stopped immediately and looked at him with a frown. "Do you know what I think?" "No, but I guess you would tell me. I think you are hoping I would contradict you." He gave her that charming smile that made him the sexiest man on planet Earth. "What exactly is that supposed to mean?" "Nice try, girl, but you can stop holding your breath. I am not interested." With that, he turned his attention to Stanley. Helen could only stare at him with dismay and embarrassment. Why wasn't Ma wasting time here? The evergreen rose Okoha. Mr. and Mrs. Okoha had just arrived. Ma noticed Chuck squirm uncomfortably as if he wanted to hide. "Good evening, everyone," Rose smiled. She bent and kissed all the ladies. "Oh my goodness, Chuck, what are you wearing?" "The latest trend. It bleeds my heart when I think of the energy and time I spent on you, and you turn out this way." "He turned out alright, I would say, Mom, compared to." "Just because you had the good sense to marry a fashion designer doesn't make you any better." But Charles and Stanley have always remained good boys. Uche chuckled, Chuck scowled, and Rose swept away to meet her husband. Mma turned to Helen then, thinking it was time to go backstage. She was just delaying so she would give Helen and Chuck time to get reacquainted, but the mild commotion at the door stopped her. Everyone turned as Amber entered wearing a dress which did nothing to hide her tantalizing body. Mma felt her anger rise. Just for once, she wanted a perfect night with friends. She didn't know how she got in because no one invited her, but she guessed no one at the gate would turn her away. Especially now the rumor was out that she was her mother. Amber walked towards them. Anybody looking at her would only see a confident and beautiful woman, used to being the center of attention. But inside she was quaking. She never knew she wanted her daughter. She was never quite sure she was capable of loving her as a mother until she met her at Yemi Yem's engagement party. And since then, all she wanted was an opportunity to be a mother to her only child. And she was going nowhere till she achieved that. Mma had a right to be angry, she thought. Who wouldn't be if they were faced with a mother who never wanted them? But she was determined to earn her forgiveness. Amber came to the group and greeted everybody. Mma watched the men almost come apart at her presence. Their eyes locked and Amber smiled at her. I can't wait for the show to start, but I'm sure it will be wonderful. Mma ignored her and looked about for a means of escape. She could feel the awkwardness in the air. Everyone waited to see what would happen between mother and daughter. Luckily, she caught one of her assistants giving her signals to come backstage, and she nodded, glanced at Helen to gain her attention, but she was busy arguing heatedly with Chuck, who looked unconcerned regarding Helen lazily. It is amazing how much threat a little girl like you can issue. Mma saw Helen blazing with anger and called it a beginning to what she had in mind. Excuse me, Helen, we are wanted, and you, Eva? Mma could see the relief on Helen's face. What kind of a monster is that? Helen asked as soon as the three of them were on their way backstage. He doesn't trust women, Eva answered. Can you imagine how arrogant he was? He had the guts to tell me he was not interested, as if I was giving him the green light. Eva laughed. That is the Chuck I know. He is an enigma. I don't understand him myself. When the four of them were growing up, I was their baby sister and I tagged along behind them. Wherever they went, whatever they did, much to their irritation. I was a tomboy and did all sorts of wrong things. He was the only one who had the heart to spank me. Yet, when they were doing boys' thing and didn't want to include me, he was the only one who took pity on me and asked for my inclusion in the game. Quite an enigma. Tall, rich, and handsome. What more does a lady want? I hate his audacity. The one who watched sat alone in the shadows and wondered how to get rid of her. The bride was finally home. The stupid woman had the audacity to snatch her dreams away, planning on the easiest way, but the most evil way to kill her.
In the still of the night, I think of you. My heart beats with every thought of you. You're the one I can't let go. In your arms I find my home.